Welcome to our podcast From Cold to Close. My name is Saeed and I'm the founder here at SRC Growth Partner, a company that works with professional service firms from around the world to help them increase their revenue and profitability by acquiring new clients. Recognized globally as the premier expert on organizational culture and inclusion, my guest today is Cornelia Shipley-Bearyman, founder and CEO of 3C Consulting, a company that works with Fortune 500 companies, visionary nonprofits, and governing bodies as they aim to create culture of equity, well-being, and shared human progress. Cornelia is the author of a best-selling book, Design Your Life. Her keynote is on conscious culture creation. It's consistently rated as the top of any conference she attends. Cornelia, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
No, it's a pleasure's all mine. I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. I didn't go into too much detail on your background, and really that's simply because I don't want to ruin your story, right? Who better to tell a story than the person themselves? So I guess the best way to start off the pod, I think, is really asking you more about your background, your journey, and from where you started to where you are today, and what you're doing in the business today.
Yeah, so I like to refer to myself as an accidental entrepreneur. And I say that because, like so many people, I had a life circumstance happen. So my parents both got very ill while I was in the quote unquote right job. It's the corporate job that's supposed to set you up for all the other right corporate jobs.
Yeah.
And while I was in that role, my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer, and my father had a stroke and did not receive medical care for about 24 hours. And so, yeah, it was pretty traumatic, especially when you're an only child and you're living in New Mexico, and your family's in Michigan. And for perspective, because I know this is a global audience, think about having to fly two planes to get to where you need to be, and it being about a 6-hour flight, right? So in the midst of that, I made the decision to leave my organization and to start the business. And so it'll be 20 years in 2026 that I made that decision. And so
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so for the last 20 years now, almost, we have been working with organizations to really help them think about how to create culture as competitive advantage so that they can both get their work done and retain the key talent that delivers on that work every day.
Yeah, no, I think it's such an interesting thing that you started 20 years ago, and the topic of culture is now more prevalent than ever before, whether it's internal or internally in an organization or externally in the wider landscape of the world. I guess the question I really want to ask you was, what was the initial vision for 3C Consulting when you started off, and how has that grown over time?
Yeah, so when I first started the firm, I thought about what were the parts of my HR job that I loved
Yeah.
doing, right? And originally thought that we would be human resources, kind of outsourced HR, right? There are those firms in the marketplace that do that work. And as we got into it, we kept working with larger organizations that didn't quite need that service. But the truth of the matter was, we started working with larger organizations from the first contract we signed, and they kind of don't need boutique
Yeah.
HR firms like that. And so, but what they did need, and what I think many of our clients really do appreciate, is our take on culture, right? We've always believed that diverse, equitable, inclusive were descriptors of culture,
Mhm.
and that ultimately you can intentionally create culture and do that in ways that create competitive advantage for you and for your firm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. It's really interesting to hear that, especially the part where you said you accidentally became an entrepreneur. And also, I find it very interesting when I speak to entrepreneurs, is that iterative kind of way you approach it. You come into a market with a hypothesis. Oh, I'm going to help out HR, outsource HR services, and then you work with a bigger client and they don't need that, and you're going, okay, well, I need still want to work with them. What do they need, and kind of you pivot, and I feel like that's a lot of consulting, especially understanding what needs to be done and then going from there. So I think that's really interesting. What are some of the biggest challenges organizations are facing today in developing their leaders and building strong cultures? And how does EC consulting help them address these issues and challenges?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges, and this came up a lot during COVID. Let me say it this way: it was revealed a lot during COVID. The Edelman Trust Foundation does trust research every year, and what they've determined is that distrust is the default emotion across the globe.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
And so if people are distrusting, how do you then get anything done?
Yeah.
How do you get work done in an environment where people don't trust each other? And when you couple that with the rise of incivility in the workplace, right, and inability to hold people accountable for their behavior and their ability to get their work done, you have this confluence of problems. Right. And so our firm really does come in and help organizations first and foremost think about at scale. What's the culture that they want to be creating? And what I mean when I say at scale is, how do you get everybody's voice, from a line worker on a factory floor to the CEO in that organization's voice, involved in what the culture of that company is going to be, to ensure that it's a place where people can show up and contribute their best to move the vision and mission of the organization forward. And I think oftentimes it can be challenging for organizations to be able to do that. And I think it's also really challenging for them to sort out how they hold people accountable. And I like to say it this way, right? If you can't hold people accountable for selling a Cadillac, how are you going to hold people accountable for delivering on your cultural expectations and how they treat people?
Yeah.
And so part of that is because people are uncomfortable with having crucial conversations, having critical conversations, having hard conversations. And a lot of what we do is help organizations and their leaders in particular get comfortable with the hard conversations that they have to be able to move the business forward.
I love that. Absolutely love that. I think I can definitely speak from personal experience. I think the biggest levers for growth is tackling those hard conversations. And often, I think it's a Will Smith quote. I don't know if he's taken it from somewhere else, where he basically says, on the other side of fear is the best decision you're ever going to make, right? And there's a lot of anxiety that builds up. Oh, I don't want to speak to this person. I don't want to tell them something, or I don't want to be direct, or something builds up. And being able to go over to them and have a conversation, be frank, be direct, but be empathetic to them as well. And being able to have that conversation can really, you can leave it feeling like a weight has been lifted off your shoulders, their shoulders. They're happy that you've spoken to them a lot of the time. And it goes without saying that people can leave those conversations in a better place than, obviously, if it's done right. If you come in all guns blazing, then yeah, exactly. So yeah, no, I think it's a really great point, and especially when you mentioned now more than ever, people are more so distrusting, and it kind of ties into my next point in terms of 3C consulting. You focus on the three C's that you call clarity, capability, and capacity. Can you, I guess, elaborate on what each of these C's mean in practice for your clients?
Yeah, so first and foremost, oftentimes when we start any engagement, right, we got to get clear about what the desired outcomes are, what's happening in the organization, right? What is that clarity piece, right? What's happening and what do we want to have happen? And then does the organization have the capability to do the work? Right? Do they have the capability to get done what needs to get done? And if not, how do we enhance that capability? And then last is capacity, right? I talked about this in my book. I talked about the fact that people have a 2,000-pound life on a 1,000-pound road. Right? If the infrastructure is only designed to hold 1,000 pounds and you've got 2,000 pounds worth of things you have to get done, you don't have capacity. And so from a human capital perspective, how do we help organizations expand the capacity of the humans working in their organizations to be able to deliver on the work? And so we look at both capability. Can a person understand how to do the job? And then do they have the mental and emotional capacity to get the work done?
It makes a lot of sense, and it kind of ties in really well with the 3C Consulting name that you have. So I love that, and clearly it's well thought out and plays into everything. I guess I really want to talk about the innovative approaches you take when you go into an organization, and your methodologies, and how is it that you employ the 3C Consulting, and obviously you touched on it there, when you work with clients, what is it that you come in and do for them?
Yeah, so one of the things we are often asked to do, people often ask us like, where do we start working with you? And there kind of a couple of times when clients will either call us or we start working with them. One of which is when they're really looking to create the next iteration of their culture. And so we have a proprietary process. It's called the Culture Lab. We've trademarked that. And we take the organization at scale, either virtually or in person, through our proprietary process to help them clarify and iterate on what needs to stay in their culture, what needs to go in their culture, and what needs to grow in their culture, right? Because we know there's some things that, yeah, they work and they're working well, and there's some things that it's like, this isn't going to work anymore. And then there's some things where things are happening in pockets of the organization that are amazing, that they haven't gotten to scale, right? They haven't figured out how to get it across the enterprise. And so that process helps us help our clients do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense, and I think it's always interesting to hear what exactly, when you come in, what you need to be looking at, and where you are now, and what you need to be looking at, looking to the future, right? And especially with culture at the moment, in terms of larger organizations, how do you help organizations consciously? Person's not doing this, or this isn't what we. Is it to do with hiring? Is it to do with what is it?
Yeah, so here's what I would say. First and foremost is culture happens organically and naturally, right? And it doesn't matter if you're looking at your friend group or any organization, a culture emerges. And if you're not intentional, it can emerge in ways that aren't useful and productive. And so we typically start with an organization by saying, what is your strategy? What's your strategic plan? What's the business objective? And then what's the culture needed to deliver on that business objective? Right? This isn't about like, oh, we just want everybody to get along and have a kumbaya experience. No, we have work to do. And given who we want to attract and retain and who can do this work, there's a particular culture that's required. And that looks different if you're in an engineering firm than if you're in a PR firm. PR people like different things than engineers like. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you try to have a culture of an engineering firm in a PR organization, it's not going to go well.
Yeah.
And so we spend a lot of time helping organizations really think through, what is the talent you say you want to attract to do this work? If you want to attract that talent, what's the culture that's going to allow them to, one, want to come work here, and two, do the work in a way that helps them to grow and thrive and deliver on the business, right? Now, if you have people in the organization who say, we're not ready to make those changes, right? We're not ready to evolve in that way, then organizationally, you've got some decisions to make, because either you want to retain and advance and attract this talent that can deliver, or you want to do things the way you've always done them. And the reality is it's not an either or, it's a both and, because there are ways in which organizations have worked and grown and evolved that are working for them. There are also ways in which organizations have worked and grown and evolved that are hindering them from attracting and retaining the talent that they need to do the work. And so it's about integrating what's working and removing what isn't, and then adding what's necessary based on how people's expectations of their employers have continued to evolve and change.
No, I love that. I think the example you've given there, in terms of a company full of engineers and a PR firm, it perfectly describes exactly what you're trying to say. People are different, but you need to profile the kind of organization you want to be, the type of the people that you want to bring into that organization for you to even have a chance at having a successful culture. And if you don't know that about yourself, then you have to get savvy and you have to learn that about yourself and you have to get into the weeds a little bit there.
That's right.
In terms of then, how do you measure the impact and ROI of 3C consulting services for your clients? Obviously, you go in there, you tell them what to do, they have to enact it, they have to do it. How do you measure that?
Yeah, so we think about helping our organizations think through what their key performance indicators are, right? And so from a cultural perspective, there are obvious ones that everybody probably measures that's listening to us right now, right? There's things like, regrettable turn in the organization, but there are also things like internal promotion rates, right? We have a client that we helped actually the number of leaders who were able to actually develop leaders in their organization and then move them throughout the company.
Wow. Wow.
Right? So it's not just about like that's a leader you want to replicate, one that's developing people to the point that they can get promoted in another part of the business and thrive, right? So it's about helping organizations think through non-traditional measures like that are going to help them be able to track how their culture is doing and developing and ensure that they're tracking the things that matter to their culture and what they're trying to have happen in their organization, right? If you say you're a solely promote from within company, right? But you're not tracking who are the leaders in sales that are developing people that can then go be successful in finance. That's a problem, right? Because you need to figure out how you're tracking those things so that you know that your objectives are actually being met.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and it's a great way to go in terms of leaders creating leaders, right? And it's definitely a skill. It's not a common skill as well. Leadership isn't easy. If it was, then we'd all be leaders and everyone, and you wouldn't have any followers, right? So, but 100%, that's a really interesting aspect that I never thought of. In how would you track the creation of leaders within an organization and then being able to identify their skill sets to be able to go, well, sales might not be where you're great in, but if you go to finance, this is where you're going to thrive. And in moving into that part of the organization and being able to develop more leaders from your role, it can have a compounding effect from the sounds of things. So it's really interesting. I love that you gave that example. So I was wondering, are you able to share a specific example of how 3C Consulting has helped a client achieve a significant transformation in their leadership or culture?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think. I want to do that in a way that protects our
Yeah,
clients
without naming names, of course.
without naming names. So we have a client that hired us to do a culture audit for them. It was an interesting time for the organization. There were a lot of interesting things happening in the organization, and there was some discord around what should or shouldn't be done with the data that came back from the culture audit. And so we were brought in to take a look at what the audit results were, what their feedback was from their survey and all of that. And then we did about 6 months of work with the organization to sort out, given this data, what were the changes that they were comfortable making and what were the changes that they weren't comfortable making. As a result of that, we were able to help them redesign what the cultural expectations were by role in terms of what the leaders were expected to be able to do and deliver for their culture. And as a result of that, there were some leadership changes that were made at the top of the organization. And now the organization is very much thriving from a culture perspective. The other example that comes to mind, we had a situation where we went in, we were asked to help prepare and do a strategic plan for a nonprofit, a very large nonprofit. And their executive team staged a coup in the middle of the offsite.
Wow.
Yeah,
Oh
it was fun times. It was
my
fun
God.
times.
Yeah.
And as a result, unfortunately, the CEO lost their job.
Wow.
That certainly wasn't our intent by any stretch of the imagination. But what happened was the staff got to the point where they were not comfortable with what was occurring, and they were able to share that with the board.
Yeah. Wow.
And so, as a part of our process, a lot of things that were happening that had gone unnoticed or unaware or unreported were reported. And then the organization then had to deal with that. And then we were able to come back in and help the organization move forward with their new leadership, regaining trust in the organization, and getting the entire leadership team then back on track.
Wow. Wow. That sounds like a quite an interesting circumstance to be put in. But I don't doubt the fact that when you come in and you highlight certain aspects of an internal of an organization, and you're able to allow them to become more comfortable in moving up the ranks and actually, as you said, report things that were previously unreported, it can cause a lot of friction. But again, in the long term, it's probably a good thing, right? Because then you can recorrect, you can realign the values, the culture of an organization, and you can go, okay, this is the way we're going. So that's really interesting. You said that. In terms of then leadership development in itself, what are the emerging trends that you see that you believe will be the most important in the coming years?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things people are going to have to sort out is how they build their own individual capacity and then the capacity of the people that they lead. And that's all about your mindset, right? If you don't have a generative mindset, you're going to stay stuck, right? Because the rate at which information is coming
Hmm.
is happening now at a rate that our brains can't process it all.
Yeah.
Right. We already know that, right? That's already been researched and determined. And so, given that that's the case, it's about doing the work to expand your mindset to be able to then effectively lead. Right. And as part of that, it's also about getting comfortable with change and growth. And what I often say to audiences when I'm speaking is people are not afraid of change. Right. If they were afraid of change, they wouldn't get married, they wouldn't get divorced, they wouldn't buy a new car, a new house, have a kid, none of those things. If people were really afraid of change, the reality is they're afraid of being out of control. And control is a false construct anyway.
Mm.
And so when you understand that the only thing you can control is yourself, and your reaction, and you can't control your reaction, but you can control your response to whatever is occurring, right? Those are the two things you can control. And so if you have a mindset that is continuing to grow and expand, you expand your ability to respond effectively and get the results you need to drive the business forward.
Yeah. I think I absolutely love this topic, and I think it plays into personal development, growth mindset, and things like that. And I feel like a lot of the leaders I know in my own network, a lot of the leaders I speak with on this podcast and stuff, that have a similar mindset, because as a leader, you have to have that kind of mindset of controlling what you can actually control, and there's only a few things you can control, which is, and I love how you say, your response to a situation, not your reaction to a situation. They're two completely different things. I've never thought of it like that, but it's spot on. And I guess that it's a challenging thing to do when you're not conscious of what you're doing, right? But when you bring it to the conscious, bring it to the forefront, and then you have to actively work on it. And this is why I love entrepreneurship, because it forces you to work on it. You don't have a choice in the matter. Either you work on it or your business dies. Either you work on it or you don't make any money. Either you work on it, you don't pay your bills, right? So like it's do or die. So you have to do it. Most people, I agree with you. Most people are not scared of change. They might have friction towards change, but once they're presented with a nice enough or an easy enough solution to it, they'll move towards it. People love change in reality. So I think it's a really interesting point. In terms of then, the world is evolving right now, in terms of you seeing a lot of AI talk, you're seeing automations, you're seeing a lot of technology grow. How do you see the role of technology evolving in leadership development and culture building, and how does that play into everything?
Yeah, I was reading an article recently about CEOs spending time with their AI coaches.
Yeah.
taking walks in the morning with their AI coach. And so I do think that what AI creates is an opportunity to really automate
Mm,
so much of what is not humanly necessary.
mm,
So it's not that humans aren't necessary. It's that there's work in the system that isn't humanly necessary.
mm,
And so the opportunity exists to leverage AI to get that work done so that the humans can be doing the innovative work that only we can do,
mm-hmm.
right? And from a leadership perspective, I don't know that we'll ever get to the place where a human being is reporting to an AI.
Yeah.
We may.
Yeah.
I mean, we
Yeah.
could.
Yeah.
We could, but I don't anticipate that happening. And so it's always going to be required that people continue to figure out how to effectively be in relationship to other people in ways that support relationships that are enable the work to get done.
I absolutely love that response. I think it's a really interesting point because humans are humans at the end of the day, and running an organization, being in an organization, there's a lot of tasks that every single person in their jobs will go, I don't want to do that, or I don't like doing that, or it's the little admin jobs here and there. It's the little things that go, oh, do I have to do that? You put it off for a while because you don't want to do it. And there's so much going on at the moment where, yes, it's a way to make you more efficient. It's a way to make you more aligned in your role. Actually, the way you mentioned there with automating things, it reminds me of how human beings only have a certain amount of bandwidth a day, a week, a month, a year, right? And it reminds me of Mark Zuckerberg and how he would only wear the same T-shirt every single day, and you'd see loads of pictures of him wearing the same T-shirt or whatever it was. And his reason was, I have a few decisions to make a day that are highly important, so I'd much rather waste my energy and bandwidth on those high leverage decisions rather than decisions that are in his mind trivial, right? And obviously everyone has different kind of trivial decisions that need to be made. I think that's a really interesting point in the sense that AI might be there, but it's not there to ruin your life. It's there to make you more efficient and allow you to be more human in the organization and in your relationships. Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting. So, in terms of what advice would you give to organizations looking to consciously iterate their culture? What are the key qualities that leaders need to possess in order to be successful in today's complex and ever-changing world?
Yeah, there's a couple things. There's a assessment that we use in our business, and it talks about helping leaders understand their leadership style. Is it a creative style or is it a reactive style? And so are leaders more relationally focused or task oriented? And what we know from the research is that you need to be more relationally oriented than task oriented, more creative than reactive. And so if you're not fostering in your leaders their own ability to access their own individual creativity and their
Mm-hmm.
own genius and have ways for them to iterate on their ideas and their unique perspective, if you're not creating opportunities for people to make meaningful connections and to really invest in the ongoing development of your people, that's going to be the place and space where it becomes challenging to grow your leadership, because your organization can only grow to the capacity of the people who lead it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
That's your ceiling.
yeah,
And if you're not expanding the leadership capacity of the people leading your organization's going to stay stuck.
yeah. It's a great point. It reminds me of the theory of constraints, right? What is the biggest constraint in your business? And often it's people, right? If you're a small business, it might be the founder. If you're a bit larger business, it might be your leadership team. But whatever it is, often the constraint is often a person and their capacity to be able to break through. And that's why organizations hire and pay well really high level people, because that expands the capacity of the organization. In terms of post pandemic life, has created a different world. We're currently on a podcast across the pond, thousands of miles away, right? And there's Zoom calls being done internally now more than ever before. People aren't actively having to go into the office, and things are different, to say the least. How does an organization manage culture in this new environment? What is it about this new environment that they can leverage, and what is it that they need to be able to accept and I guess move forward from?
Yeah, I think the way in which you connect virtually is different than the way that you connected in person. And the problem or the challenge for lots of organizations is that they just tried to recreate what they did in person online. That's not the answer, right? That's not the way that you create meaningful connection, right? When we facilitate things for organizations online, it looks very different than what it looks like when we're in person. And, we use the technology to our advantage. We put people in small groups. We create opportunities for them to connect, for them to iterate on ideas, right? So you've got to be able to understand in a virtual world, the rules change. It doesn't mean you can't do it. You just have to adapt based on what you're trying to create in your culture. And if you're trying to create meaningful connection inside your employee population, that requires that you create connections for them online in ways that you haven't done or hadn't done pre-pandemic.
Yeah, it's about adaptability, right? It's about changing with the times, figuring out and actually learning what the new times require. What do people respond to? How can you leverage technology to be able to create that? Yeah, I think that's really interesting. What is your vision for the future of work, and how is 3C Consulting helping to shape that future?
Yeah, it's interesting. That's an interesting question because there's a piece of me that says, I don't know.
Hmm.
Right? There's a piece of me that's like, listen, I'm not sure. And then there's a piece of me that says, I think the answer is going to be that the nature of work is going to continue to change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm just going to use McDonald's as an example because almost every country has a McDonald's, so people should be able to relate to this example, right? When I was growing up, if you went into a McDonald's, somebody took your order. As a child, somebody even brought your order to the table when I was really small, right? And now today, there's still people who work in McDonald's, right? There are people who have to grill your burgers and drop your fries and bag up your order. But do you need somebody to take the order? Maybe, maybe not,
Yeah.
right? Do you need somebody to fill up your drink cup? Maybe, maybe not, right? So it's not that humans are going to be obsolete or unnecessary. That's never going to happen. The nature of what we're going to be required to do is going to be different. And if you're not thinking about where and how you as an individual want to play, one, and two, what the skill sets are that you're going to require as an organization or these new roles that are going to emerge, right? I mean, never in my life did I think there would be a job called a prompt engineer for AI.
Yeah.
Right? Right. So this isn't a case of like there's not going to be jobs. The jobs are just going to be different.
Yeah.
And people are going to have to get comfortable with stretching themselves to do things they haven't done before. And if you say, listen, I don't think I want to do that, there are jobs that are not going to go away, right? Like, the skilled trades aren't going anywhere. We will always need a plumber.
Absolutely.
We will always need a plumber. Like that job is not going anywhere.
AI is not doing anything with plumbing.
Right? And so at the end of the day, organizations just have to be really, really clear that the jobs are going to change and they've got to upskill the people that they want to retain for those evolving roles based on their business, right? And what that looks like again in an engineering firm and what that looks like in a PR firm is not going to be the same, because the PR firm can say, okay, great, we're going to hire an AI prompt engineer to write all of our media releases, right? But once the prompt engineer has done it and the Claude or Chat or whatever has spit out its response, somebody still has to technically edit that piece of literature, right? And so, yeah, it's the job is going to actually get easier for the person doing the editing, assuming that the prompt engineer knows what they're doing,
Absolutely.
right? And can get a really good prompt that's going to spit back a really great draft for that person to now edit. So it's a question of, do you understand how work is going to evolve? And I think AI is going to play a big part in that. I think technology is going to continue to play a big part of that. I think that logistically, leadership and people's ability to expand their capacity to lead is going to play a big part of that. And I think lastly, people's mindset is going to play a big part of that, right? Henry Ford was right. Whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. And that's a mindset measure. And if you come at life with a constructive mindset or a destructive mindset, you're going to either create things that are constructive or destructive in your life and in your work and in your business and in your career. And so it's really about recognizing your ability to expand your creative capacity to lead and grow and develop.
I think it's such an interesting response you made there, and I couldn't agree with you more in terms of the side of upskilling. And I read an article the other day where it started talking about how 5 years ago, 10 years ago, upskilling was looked at as learn to code. Right, that's the new thing. You have to learn to code if you want to upskill, because you're going to lose your jobs to all these things. And now with AI coming in, now the article started saying, well, all these people that learn to code, right? It's like a chicken or egg situation, right? Like AI can now create code. There's AI out there that can create code, and it's pretty good, if not really good, right? But it still needs someone who can code to understand what it's spit out, as you said, and go, okay, well, no, let's change it here, let's change it here. So the way I say it is the chicken or egg situation, because you have to have a level of competence to be able to do that, right? To correct AI. But at the same time, it's like if you're learning to code, but jobs are being taken away from AI for you to have the opportunity to code. It's about your mindset and mentality to be able to go, okay, well, I'm going to do this in my spare time. I have to learn this in my spare time. So when I come into an organization, I can do that side of things, and I'm confident I can do that side of things. So it is very much down to how people are and how they approach the future, because the future's coming whether we like it or not. So we got to get on board, or we're going to get left behind, right? So I think it's really interesting to talk about that. I want to before we go into our next section of the podcast, I just wanted to touch on your book, Design Your Life. Right. What is for the listeners and viewers out there? What is Design Your Life, and what inspired you to write it?
Yeah, so Design Your Life has an interesting story. Back in 2003, I was a graduate student at Southern Methodist University studying abroad in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. And while I was living there, I got an opportunity to really experience Australian life and the kind of no worries attitude that is pervasive in that culture. Right. And it was fascinating to me, just the pace at which Australians live and the quality of life that they have. And I came home and I really wanted to write a book about that experience. And I graduated, I started working, I got into my job, and then my parents got sick, and then I was trying to run this business and take care of them, and then I fell in love, and then I got engaged, and then I got married. And 5 days after my wedding, my mother passed away unexpectedly. And at that point, I realized that the life I had designed actually worked, because I was off for 3 weeks. My business didn't miss a beat. My clients were taken care of, and I was able to be present in the moment for what mattered most in that moment, which is my definition of success, right? To be able to be present in the moment for what matters most in that moment. And so the book is really about, what do you need to really, the subtitle is Design Your Life, How to Create a Meaningful Life, Advance Your Career, and Live Your Dreams. And so I talk in that book about things like creating your say yes standards, right? Under what condition will you give your yes? Oftentimes we haven't decided that in advance. And because of that, we give our yes to things we shouldn't, right? how do you market yourself as an individual, right? You don't, when people say, what do you do? The answer isn't insert title and company name here, right? That's not the answer. And so I talk in the book about things like that that are intended to support people to think about how they create meaning and joy in their life. And I'm forever grateful that Marshall Goldsmith saw fit to write the introduction to the book as well.
Amazing. It's I'm sure that whoever gets the opportunity to read it, they'll find some real opportunity and change in their life, and some insights as well from someone that actually managed to create a life by design in designing their life. This section of our podcast we like to call the entrepreneurship room, or the entrepreneur's room, right? And we ask a set number of questions to each of our entrepreneurs, just to understand how entrepreneurs think and their day-to-day. So the first question I'd like to ask here is, how are you currently spending your days as a leader of your business?
Well, that's a good question. I spend most mornings getting ready, right? So all of the mindset stuff we've been talking about is how I spend most of the morning. And then I actually have aligned my days to the energetics of the days in the week, right? So my PhD is in metaphysics, and so there is an energy to each day of the week. There's an energy to the time of the day. If you're into which I'm not into astrology, but all of that stuff has meaning and usefulness and all the things. And so I spend the morning preparing myself to expand my capacity. And then depending upon the day, I'm either talking to potential clients or working with actual clients or prospecting with clients or working with our partners to go after partnered business. And then there's a portion of at least one of my days where I chair the foundation for my family's foundation. I chair the board for my family's foundation. And so there's usually a portion of some business day that I'm working on stuff for the foundation and the charter school that we founded. And then typically on Mondays, I spend a lot of time with my team. Mondays are usually operational days. So we're looking at what needs to get done, what's gotten done operationally, what needs to happen, having check-ins with folks, making sure projects are on track. And then Fridays are typically cleanup days, right? Typically that's the way life works for most entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah.
And so we're looking at what happened over the week, what needs to get done before 5 o'clock on Friday.
Yeah.
And what needs to get ready for the week that's coming.
Yeah. I love that, and I couldn't agree more with the Monday as the operational day. If there's an issue, I'd rather be told or sign things off day one, 9 o'clock, 8:30 a.m. as soon as I can, so that the week can go, and then clean up 100% at the end of the week for sure. What are the most important metrics to your business? What do you measure? What do you look at? Is there anything in particular you do?
There's a couple things I look at. One of the measures that we actually just recently put in place as a contractor measure. Our business is highly driven based on our contractors. And so one of the things we measure now is retention of their coaching clients, right? And that impacts revenue. It impacts, customer satisfaction, all the things. And we now actually have created an incentive to incentivize when that happens, right? So the better that they perform, they get a bonus every time that their client extends, and we know that has long-term impact to us. One of the other things I've started measuring in the business, well, let me say it this way. We know there are leading indicators and lagging indicators, right? And what is useful to measure are the leading ones, not the lagging ones, right? Revenue is important, right? But if you're not doing the stuff to create the revenue, okay, right? So, we're measuring things like number of contacts, number of conversations, number of, social media engagement, and not engagement from the space of did somebody like the post, but did somebody call us from the post?
Yeah.
Right? And so it's a different measure, right? Like I'm not trying to be an Instagram influencer. That's not why I'm on Instagram, right? But I am interested in tracking what are the topics that we're talking about that are resonant enough that people are picking up the phone and calling us, right? And so those are the kinds of indicators that we're tracking in the business, in addition to the traditional, time to close and profit and sales and all of that.
I love that you said that. I think episode 2 or 3, I think it was Aaron of ISPA. He said the same thing. Leading indicators and lagging indicators. You want to be measuring leading indicators. And it's a really interesting point you mentioned there, because you two are the only two that have mentioned that specific point. But it's absolutely, the way I say it is, measure inputs, not outputs, right? The inputs will lead to the outputs. So it's, 100%. It's really interesting to hear. How are you currently growing your business? And obviously it sounds like you take a methodical approach with what the leading indicators and lagging indicators. How are you currently growing your business? Are you doing specific BD activities? Are you big on social media? What is it that you're doing?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. Actually, last week, I celebrated my 1 year anniversary with an organization called the Bow Collective. And so we're an international organization of women business owners that collectively do about $2 billion in business a year. And so I have some emerging partnerships and collaborations happening in that community, which I'm really excited about. And I have upped my LinkedIn presence significantly since the beginning of the year. I was on vacation and something happened with our former vice president, Kamala Harris, and Bruce Fisher, the Senator Fisher's husband. He refused to shake her hand at an inauguration ceremony for her, installation ceremony for his wife, and that got me posting about incivility in the workplace. And so I think I've been pretty good. I've posted almost every day now on social media, or on LinkedIn, I should say. So that's been new, and it's been interesting to track and see like what things are people interested in, what things are getting more impressions. And so that's been an interesting place to learn. And then I've also started speaking more in this year. I've already had 4 speaking engagements since the beginning of the year, and have several more lined up. And last year I didn't speak as much, so I'm excited to be getting back both on the physical and the virtual stage this year.
Amazing. That's it sounds like you're a busy woman, to say the least. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a couple more questions and then we'll be done for today.
No, absolutely.
So where do you see the business in 3 to 5 years? Where do you see 3C Consulting? How do you see yourself evolving?
Yeah, so I have not determined if my exit strategy is going to be an employee sale, read that to a contractor, right, in my world, or if we'll just sell it, sell it outright. But I would anticipate, listen, in 10 years I will be over 60. And so I don't know that I'll still be working in this business at that point in time. But I certainly hope that we will have established ourselves in the marketplace in such a way that the business is attractive for acquisition, and that the IP that we've created is able to live on.
Yeah, amazing. That's really interesting, and that's always interesting to hear, because people have different long-term goals, and occasionally you come across someone who goes, yeah, I want to exit soon, and it's always interesting to hear that, because you've worked 20 plus years on your baby, right? And there comes a time where it is time to say goodbye, right? So 100%, that's really interesting. And I guess the last question, this is a question I like to end every single podcast on, and that is, if you had a magic wand you could wave to solve one business problem, what would that problem be?
Okay, one business problem in my business, one business problem in the
your
business
business,
world.
in your business.
My business. Listen, as an entrepreneur, I think every entrepreneur listening to me would shoot me if I didn't say sales, right?
Yeah.
Like, is there a bigger problem for an entrepreneur than sales, regardless of how much you might be selling? And I think what I would say about that is, for me, I think it's twofold. I think it's sales cycle time, because we can never determine when someone is going to buy. right? I mean, I'm thinking about a particular situation we're in right now where we're the number one kind of candidate for this opportunity. It was put to RFP,
Hmm.
and we did respond, and we've been notified that like everything's been acceptable, but we still don't know if we're going to get the work or not, and it's been like 7 months,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
So 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 there's cycle time, and then none of us have enough decision makers to talk to,
Mm.
right? When you think about the fact that at any given time only 3% of the people you're talking to are going to be ready to buy, there's we just don't, like, I should be talking to somebody right now,
Yeah.
right? Just in terms of those numbers. And so having enough people to talk to, and decreasing that cycle time would be the two problems in the business. I think if I could solve those two, I'd be in a good place.
Yeah, no. If I had $1 for the amount of times our clients or any leader that in a consulting firm that I've spoken to that says sales cycle, I'd be a millionaire right now, like straight up cash millionaire. It's such a big problem for most organizations, and so it's really, I think that's a really interesting point because a lot of the conversations I have, sales is, especially in consulting, because of the long sales cycle, it can be quite an interesting thing to be able to deal with when you're not 100% accustomed to a sales process where you're required to wait, that's the reality. Cornelia, it's been an absolute pleasure. I thought
My pleasure, absolutely.
it was a great conversation, so I really appreciate your time. Thank you for all your insights that you've shared today.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, brilliant. Thank you.